Sometimes in OncoPT, you don't need another checklist or another list of precautions that you have to memorize and put into practice. Sometimes what you actually need is hearing how somebody actually approaches a real life human case in oncology, and a complex one at that. Over the past few weeks, we have talked about stability, when to hold treatment, and how to calibrate instead of defaulting to fear when working with a person who has advanced cancer. Today, I want to bring all of that together and walk you through a real case step by step so that you can hear how this reasoning actually works in clinical practice. Now, the reason that we're doing this is that one of the most challenging things early in your career as an OncoPT is that you're often practicing, you're often doing this kind of thinking, this clinical judgment in isolation. You're making high stakes decisions, you are weighing fracture risk and treatment cycles and fatigue and side effects and comorbidities. And most of the time you're doing this without hearing how someone else thinks through it. And this isolation can really amplify second guessing. So instead of another list of precautions, let's walk through a case together. So I worked with a patient who was a 76-year-old male. We'll call him Pablo. That's a fake name. Pablo had metastatic prostate cancer. He was originally diagnosed several years ago, and at the time that I was seeing him, had been dealing with his prostate cancer diagnosis for 10 years. It was now metastatic stage 4, and he had known bony metastases in his left humeral head, lumbar spine, and then his left pelvis, kind of around where his hip joint was. At the time I was seeing him, he was also undergoing chemotherapy with docetaxel, and he was being treated with leuprolide and enzalutamide at the same time. So he is going through treatment. He has stage 4 cancer with known bony metastases and in multiple locations. So when he came to PT, he was experiencing fatigue, weakness, and frustration because these side effects he was dealing with and had been dealing with a long time meant that he had trouble playing with his grandchildren. And one of the things he also was really passionate about was refereeing youth sports. And he really wanted to get back to that. But he knew physically right now, there was no way he could step out onto the field in order to do that. And so when I first evaluated this patient and was starting to come up with a treatment plan, I wasn't asking what exercises should I give him. Yes, that comes later. Yes, that's absolutely something that we want to consider. But I was asking first and foremost, how can I implement a treatment plan with Pablo, fake name, that is going to address what he's dealing with safely and meaningfully. And the first place that I went, because of the bone metastases, we're looking at that structural stability, like we talked about in our previous video. So with this patient, we have known bony metastases in left humeral head, left pelvis, and then in his lumbar spine. So immediately I'm thinking about the mechanical integrity of these. I am thinking, what kind of movements do I want to avoid or stay away from through the spine? What kind of loads, what kind of stressors do I need to be thinking about through the left hip? What kind of positions do I need to be cognizant of when it comes to that left humeral head bony metastases? And instead of viewing this as limitations of, oh, I've got this and I've got this, oh my gosh, and I also have this, I have 3 bony metastases, these gave me boundaries to work within. There is a safe zone in here that I can work in, and I can absolutely challenge this patient, but I can still establish my boundaries so I know where I'm going to be most safe and most effective with working with this individual. So for our treatment plan, this meant no isolated resistance to that left shoulder. We were avoiding those excessive spinal movements, flexion, extension, rotation. And we were really cognizant of the types of interventions that we were implementing with respect to that left pelvic metastasis. So it didn't eliminate the movement. And in fact, we did quite a movement that I'll share with you here in just a bit. But it shapes those boundaries of what we can work within and know that we are being safe when working with this particular patient. Now, next up is the oncologic context. So this person was actively going through treatment, actively going through docetaxel chemotherapy. And that absolutely matters in all of this. This person was dealing with fatigue. We had varying levels of his functional capacity, how good he felt. Some days he just didn't feel good. And so we didn't do as much on those days. And there were some days where he was feeling really good and we were able to get more done in our session or push harder. That's totally okay. That's totally how this oncology patient population works a lot of times. And we have to have that flexibility. Those bony metastases this person was experiencing weren't just in isolation. We had all these other things, including treatment cycle and whatnot, to consider, and not to mention the side effects of the other treatments that this person was undergoing as well. So I knew tolerance would fluctuate even as I'm planning this treatment out, and just having this idea in my head of, okay, we're going to have to be flexible. It's totally fine. Now, number 3 is functional pain. In this patient scenario, this person was not dealing with functional pain. We knew that there were bony metastases. They were largely asymptomatic from a pain standpoint. And so this patient didn't have pain as that limiting factor in what we were dosing, what we were choosing to do. And that was really helpful. And sometimes that's the case for your patient. Sometimes that's not the patient's case. But that's what we are looking for to see what kind of circumstances are we working with when it comes to this particular person. And then that 4th thing that I was looking at was load calibration. So what am I trying to do with this person? We set our treatment plan for 2 times a week. Fatigue was something that this person was very much dealing with. So we started with recumbent bike intervals. So that puts us into a non-weight bearing position for the left pelvic metastasis. So we did 1 minute on, 1 minute off for 10 minutes, and then we built up from there. Balance, we avoided prolonged single leg stance on that left side where that bony metastasis was. We did a lot of tandem stance. We did right single leg stance because that was very appropriate. And we worked on controlled dynamic drills. I did a lot of ladder drills with him, cone drills, etc., carefully dosed. But with that, I do want to say we didn't avoid left single leg stance altogether. We were still doing lots of walking interventions, but that wasn't all of what I was doing in a session. You heard me mention the recumbent bike. With balance, we tried to do more like tandem leg or even double leg balance in addition to the right single leg. But we did still do some left single leg because that was extremely functional for this person. His primary mode of getting from point A to point B was still walking. And so being sure that he was able to do that safely and effectively. We worked on weakness. We worked on overall strength. And that did include in both his upper extremities and his lower extremities. Now, there were certain movements we had to avoid, like with his left humeral head metastasis, with his left pelvic metastasis, but we still worked on strengthening those areas. So all this to say, you'll notice that we didn't work on avoidance. We didn't focus solely on avoiding. We established our thresholds, our safety parameters, and then we worked within there to make the most appropriate plan to safely and effectively help this person towards their functional goals. Now, it wouldn't be a real case if there wasn't some kind of a twist, and this is totally what happened with this person. So a few weeks into working with this person, his fatigue was more and more significant. And yes, treatment was a factor, but that didn't totally explain everything. So sat down with the patient, was trying to figure out, what else is happening here, what's going on. As we dug a little deeper, it became clear that his ability to sleep was tremendously affected by his home situation. And I'm not going to go into a bunch of details because we care about patient privacy and whatnot. But there was a very significant issue in his home life that was keeping him from sleeping. He did not have a comfortable sleeping environment where he could sleep through the night and be comfortable. And so this sleep disruption, especially as he was still going through chemotherapy, was dramatically impacting his physiologic recovery and his ability to tolerate stress, including the exercise, physical activity, PT interventions that he was going through on a weekly basis. And so when his ability to tolerate that was shrinking and had shrunk because of his impaired sleep, we have to adjust our load. That's just how real life goes. So we decreased the total duration of interventions and exercises that he was doing. We increased the kind of like in between set ratios that we did, and we shifted in the meantime towards more balance and more low intensity functional work to basically still make the biggest bang for our buck without putting him on hold, because that was not appropriate for him. And once we were able to take care of that at-home situation where that was causing him issues in being able to sleep appropriately, with the help of social work, tremendously helpful in this case, this person's sleep improved. And so did their physiologic reserve and their capacity and their ability to participate in these interventions. And so sometimes it really is just a temporary adjusting of your interventions as this person's body is able to tolerate it, is able to keep up with the stress that we're putting on it. And so once his fatigue stabilized because his sleep had improved, we gradually worked our way back up to that level of intensity we were at before this major sleep disruption. And this is what structured reasoning looks like in clinical practice, in motion, with multiple layers of all of this taking place. As we've mentioned throughout this video series, a person doesn't exist in isolation. We have to consider the context of all of this. And if I hadn't considered this person's context and outside of PT, outside of the cancer clinic, etc., I never would have dug deep enough to understand what was actually happening with his sleep. Why was it not happening, and how that was affecting his tolerance of our PT interventions. So this to say, you do not need to eliminate complexity in order to practice confidently in oncology physical therapy. Most of the time you can't, because that's just how it works in oncology. You need exposure to how this complexity is navigated. And when you can see this kind of reasoning modeled in looking into stability and the context and the person's tolerance, and calibrate what you're doing, what you're loading, what you're prescribing, your own reasoning strengthens. And you're better able to approach these kinds of often very complicated, very layered clinical decisions with more confidence. This doesn't mean that that uncertainty disappears, but it becomes navigable. Over the past few weeks, we've talked about structure and thresholds and calibration. This is what it looks like when these concepts come together in a real patient case. This is what specialist level thinking sounds like. Becoming an oncology specialist isn't just collecting knowledge and shoving more facts and stats into your brain. It's about refining how you think constantly refining how you approach these kinds of complicated, layered patient cases. If you're ready to step more fully into that level of practice, that's exactly why we've created the Cancer Rehab Community Conference. It's 2 days immersed in complex oncology cases with structured reasoning, honest clinical conversations, and exposure to how oncology clinicians navigate these kinds of high-stakes decisions. Not just what to do, but how to think and how to bring that into your own patient practice. If that feels aligned with where you're headed as an onco PT, I would genuinely love to see you there. You can find the details below.